Item A is discussion and review on animal services partnership with Concho Valley PAWS, and the presentation will be made by the Neighborhood and Family Services Assistant Director Morgan Chagwin and Concho Valley PAWS Executive Director Jenny Wilson. You are on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll be brief. This is in response, as requested at the January 16th council meeting, to come back and have some discussion about our partnership with San Angelo Animal Services in Concho Valley PAWS. So I will yield the bulk of my time today to Concho Valley PAWS since we had a good discussion last month. And just as a reminder, we do have an annual contract with Concho Valley PAWS since 2017, and that goes through an RFP open purchasing process. And it covers items such as adoption, foster, rescue, transfer, emergency and advanced medical for animals. And to date, over 14,000 animals have been saved through this contract, either through adoption or rescue transfer. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jenny Wilson.
Good morning. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to share Concho Valley PAWS with you this morning. Concho Valley PAWS has been in existence actually since 1961, but in the beginning, we operated under the Humane Society of Tom Green County, and I think that's kind of important to point out because people often wonder where the Humane Society of Tom Green County plays into this. So it's actually the same entity, but because so many humane societies exist throughout the nation, and they all have different functions, some of them even operate animal control, we thought it was very important to identify ourselves better to our community. And so in 2011, we filed a DBA to operate as Concho Valley PAWS because pets are worth saving. That's our acronym. And so we hope that that helps the community understand that the Humane Society of Tom Green County is not responsible for animal control, ticketing, licensing, things of that nature, but rather we do rescue. And so that's how we became Concho Valley PAWS. I've been with the organization for 15 years, and I've seen it grow substantially, and I'm really proud of the work that we do in our community. But I would be remiss if I said that we could do this on our own because we can't. We rely heavily on our community. We're supported by donor dollars and foundation grants. We absolutely could not do what we do in our community without our donors and the support. This is our mission, to reduce the population of homeless pets in the Concho Valley and end the killing of adoptable pets by offering low-cost spay and neuter programs, successful adoption programs, transfer programs, and support services for pet owners and education and training. So Concho Valley PAWS is known to provide adoption services, but we do so much more. This slide just kind of gives you a quick glimpse into the many programs that we offer. I will dive into some of those here in just a minute. I don't want to bore you or take up a ton of time, but I want to give you a concise yet comprehensive idea of what we provide for our city shelter, but also for our community. So Concho Valley PAWS is a 501c3, and what we like to really emphasize to the community is we are a separate entity from animal control, but we work very closely together. So it's easy for those lines to get blurred because we do step in a supportive way as often as needed or as wanted by our shelter. We have chosen to work not as adversaries, but in an alliance with our animal control because we feel that we can focus on a common goal, and that is to save lives. I think that's it's clear that no one in the position of animal control and animal services wants to see thousands of animals euthanized every year, and neither do we. So that's what we focus our work on together. So how did we get here? I think it's important for us just to take a real brief moment to look at where we started and where we're at now and where we need to go. So prior to 2016, things were very different. As a matter of fact, Animal Services was even operated under a different department within your city. But at that time, 80% of the animals served by the shelter were euthanized. Texas was one of the San Angelo was one of the highest kill shelters in the state of Texas. So it was a pretty bleak situation for our shelter pets. This is taken from the 2014-2015 operating budget, the report that is published by the City of San Angelo. The number of euthanasias performed in fiscal year 2013, before we started doing all this work, was 6,838. Only 14% of the animals served by the shelter was adopted. 76% of them were euthanized, and 8% of them were returned to owners. And it's important to note that that adoption category also contains public adoption as well as rescue pools at the time. During this time, rescues had to not only go through the same process as an individual adopting, but we had to wait for the community to have first right of refusal. And sometimes that led to rescues being at the front counter trying to pull animals at the time they're being euthanized. So it was a very convoluted, difficult process to save animals. So with that being said, I think the community and the city management wanted better for our animals, better for our community. And so they were looking for a vendor who could help provide adoptions and get those numbers up, get more animals out of the shelter in hopes of reducing those euthanasia numbers. So in October of 2016, the city of San Angelo issued a request for proposal. That's what we refer to when we say RFP, for a vendor to provide those services. PAWS was the only submission, and we were awarded the contract, and we began our services in 2017. Again, this is from the city's operating budget report. You can see what we accomplished during the first year. In fiscal year 17, we saw the number of euthanasias drop to 2,404. That's 49%. So it was a significant drop during our first year of working together. You saw the number of animals adopted up to 34%, and that is a true adoption number because at this time we're reporting only public adoptions in that category. And 76 to 49% reduction in euthanasia. And here's where we ended in fiscal year 2022. 4,034 animals were sheltered. Of that, 24% was returned to owner due to the shelter's progressive programs of returning to owner. That also does include 296 cats that participated in our spay, neuter, and return program. So we're going to be tweaking these reports as we move forward too, to give you a better idea of how everything is breaking out. But the percent of animals euthanized or died in custody was down to 15%. So what we're doing is working, but we're obviously not where we want to be yet. I think it's important for us to talk about what a complex problem it is that we face in a post-COVID world. There is actually studies being done right now by the University of Florida that are focusing on the effects of COVID in animal welfare. And unfortunately, it looks like COVID has set us back about 10 years in animal welfare with the work that was done with spay and neuter prior to the country shutting down. So we are in a several 100,000 deficit of spay and neuter surgeries, which has led the entire country to face a population explosion that unfortunately San Angelo is not immune from. But saying all of that, I think it requires a multifaceted approach, and we've talked about that before. It's not just adoption. It's got to be spay neuter. It also has to be educating our public and cultivating responsible pet owners. So these are some of the programs that I want to pull out and just spend, again, concise but comprehensive as much as possible so that you have an understanding of what we do and the importance of these programs. We'll start with our SNP program. It's probably what I consider our most important program. It's our Spay Neuter Initiative program. We provide low-cost spay and neuter services utilizing a veterinarian employed by Concho Valley PAWS, but also contracting out with local vet clinics. So this is a cost-sharing program. So for example, a senior citizen can purchase a cat voucher for $25, but that surgery actually costs us $100. So Concho Valley PAWS, with its grant money and donations, will pay that deficit of $75 to the vet. That keeps the cost low for the pet owner and makes that spay and neuter surgery accessible to them if they are restricted on funds. We offer approximately 100 vouchers every month. That does vary because it depends on the availability of space at the clinics that we partner with, and it also varies on funding. In addition to that monthly voucher that we offer, we also seek funding for and offer programs to target problem populations. I hate to put it in that term, but we have a very high population of pit bulls in our shelter, and so we know that is a breed we need to target. So recently we had just a voucher that was offered to female pits in an effort to get more of those animals fixed. So we will do things like this from time to time as funding allows. Since we've started this process with this as partners with the city, we have seen over 10,000 shelter pets saved. But even more importantly than saving them, they're fixed. We put them in loving homes, but we also fix them. More than 15,000 owned pets have been spayed or neutered, and more than 3,000 community cats have been spayed or neutered. Emergency assistance is available to people who need it through our Compassion Fund. This program is very important because we see a lot of pet owners that have to consider having their pet euthanized for treatable illness or injury, and it's generally injuries that are unexpected. We have helped with animals that have been hit by a car that got out of a yard accidentally. We've helped with animals that have been injured by an intruder. We've helped with animals that have been a victim of domestic violence. So this fund is available to support and help our pet owners, but not only that, this fund helps our shelter. Because of this fund, we're able to treat injured and ill animals that arrive at the shelter. Prior to our partnership with the City of San Angelo, these animals would have been euthanized to end suffering, even though their injuries were treatable. And that's because the city has never had a budget for veterinary care in its animal services division. So we step in and we provide that. We fix broken bones. We help with cruelty cases, like you can see. There's a couple of cruelty cases here. We get them healthy and we get them into loving homes. I think it's important to point out, though, that Concho Valley PAWS expended over $205,000 on veterinary care through this program, and that does not include our spay-neuter services. This here is a program that is offered completely free to the City of San Angelo Animal Shelter. Our Second Chance program is what I consider a fantastic alternative to a pet owner leaving a pet at the shelter. This allows the owner to participate responsibly in the rehoming of their pet. So the pet stays in their home. They register their pet with us as a pet that is available for adoption. We ensure that the pet is spayed, neutered, and vaccinated, and microchipped. And then we promote that pet for adoption the same as we do pets in our facility and pets at the shelter. It's a very successful program, but it does require that the pet owner participate in it. The nice thing about this program is it keeps pets out of the shelter, and that's what we're all about. And I think it's really important to note that a pet in a home is easier to market and easier to transition into adoption versus a pet that has to go through the trauma of being surrendered at a shelter, especially one that faces crowding. It's just a much better environment for them to stay in their home, and that makes that adoption transition so much easier. Second Chance saves lives and keeps pets out of the shelter, and that's what it's all about. We have had great success with this program. Again, the only issue we have with it is the pet owner has to be willing to participate. When we began working in the shelter, we noticed a very interesting problem. We would see people come in with moms and litters of puppies to surrender them because they couldn't care for them. It was an accidental pregnancy. At that time, we would watch those people go back into the kennels to look and see about adopting another pet. That led us to kind of really have conversations and look into some data that says people that surrender dogs at shelters will get another dog. And so what we've decided to do with this program is come alongside those pet owners and offer them that education and awareness that they're lacking. If they have a relationship with this pet and they love this pet and they're bonded with this pet, it makes sense for us to get that pet fixed and help them responsibly rehome those puppies instead of them going and finding another pet. Because if they don't qualify to adopt from a rescue or a shelter, they will go get another unaltered pet off of Facebook. So we're just all about trying to break those cycles, and this program helps us to do that. Not only are we getting the mom fixed and putting her back with her owners, She's vaccinated and microchipped, but we're making sure that all of the puppies that she had are spayed and neutered before they're put into homes. So it's much better than a free to good home ad on Facebook where they're getting no vetting at all. So this program is helping us break some cycles. Again, the Mommy and Me is very beneficial on the adoption end because we're offering cute, healthy puppies that have had an opportunity to stay with their mom, because the agreement the pet owner has to make is we will provide the service for you, but you have to keep mom and puppies together until they're naturally weaned, but we will provide all the vet care, the food, and whatever support you need to get us to that point. Help Me Get Home is one that I think most people in San Angelo have heard about. It's a fantastic program. Again, the idea is to keep pets from going into the shelter. It's a free online lost and found program. It encourages neighbors to help neighbors. You see a pet out in your neighborhood, look on Help Me Get Home, see if it's listed as lost. If you have the ability and it is safe, we ask that maybe you try to house that pet in your home overnight, hoping that the neighbor will be looking for it in time. It also helps us with education as it promotes microchipping, and it promotes collars and tags. And it's also a tool for animal control. So if one of Morgan's guys has picked up an animal, they can also access Help Me Get Home and see if it's listed as lost, get that pet home, and try to avoid the whole shelter intake process. PAWS Express, this is something that we hear a lot about. We get a lot of questions, especially when we see a euthanasia list come up. Why don't y'all transport animals out? The quick answer is we do every month. Concho Valley PAWS just recently sent 26 dogs to Canada, and we are so happy to do that. The way this program works is we work with communities who have actively, I don't want to say solved their problems, but have definitely gotten on top of the issue of population in their own community. Because they have done that, they have created a demand for an adoptable shelter pet. And so we are happy to provide them animals for adoption. The nice thing about our PAWS Express is when we see those dogs loaded up on the transport van or plane or however we get them out of here, we know that they're getting off of that transport and going directly into a home, which is very, very heartwarming. In some cases, they will go into an adoption center. We do not send animals to areas that have their own population crisis. We do not. But it's important to note that COVID changed our world without those surgeries that I spoke about earlier. We're seeing population increases throughout the nation. So we used to send thousands a year on transport. Now we're lucky to get one transport a month because all of our partners are full. And so it's something that we're constantly looking for new partners to work with, but we want to be responsible in selecting those partners, making sure that we're not creating a problem in any other community. Some of the other things that we do for our community is we provide pop-up clinics, and we enjoy partnering with the City of San Angelo for that. We provide for the microchips. Often the city will provide microchips, but we also pay for the veterinarians to be there to inject the vaccines, and we provide the vaccines through a grant we get through Petco Love. We currently offer these twice a year, but we would love to grow that program and offer them quarterly. I think the more pets we have microchipped, the quicker we can get them out of the shelter. In addition to all the programs that we offer in-house, we often refer out and we often pay for services to keep pets and people together. We utilize professional trainers here in town. Again, we outsource veterinary care to clinics, anything we can try to do to keep families together. So how are these services offered? Anyone in San Angelo can participate in our services. All that we offer is available on our website. They're also welcome to come and see us at our facility, but we also get referrals from animal control, and I think that's important. This is an important process to explain. If a citizen arrives at the city shelter with a pet that they want to rehome, the first thing they're told is to go through a counseling process with Concho Valley PAWS. Because we do offer a plethora of programs, perhaps there's a program we can offer that will assist that pet owner and keep that pet out of the shelter. And so it's called a managed intake. It is not closed intake. We don't want to confuse the two. Managed intake applies to owned pets. So we want to sit down with that pet owner and let the pet owner tell us what the situation is. Is it that the dog chewed up a favorite pair of shoes? Is it the dog is snapping at another pet? Is it because they can't potty train? Is it financial? And then we look at our programs and see what we have to offer them to support them and hopefully keeping that pet. Because again, remember that data that we looked at that says people who have pets will have pets again. So it's better for us to preserve that relationship than to allow them to continue that cycle of getting pets in their care that perhaps are not properly vetted, spayed and neutered, etc. We are committed to helping our community. I think this is very important for us to say. We have aligned ourselves with the city animal shelter because it is our goal to see that our city gets 100% of the donor dollars that is invested in our organization. So we want to make sure that every animal we save is a local pet. We have such a tremendous challenge in our community with this issue that we do not, and we have pledged not to bring pets from outside of our area. Of course, we want to save all animals, but we also feel that we can't help if we're not in a position to help, and we are in no position to help at this point. It is our dream someday that we're the facility accepting transports for communities like we are right now, but we are not there yet. We take every opportunity to encourage adoptions, and we offer low-cost and free events very often. These are some photos of events that we have off-site, so we're not just at the shelter or just at our facility. We often go into Petco, Tractor Supply. Lots of businesses host us, and we're happy to have that relationship with our community. These are just a few of the programs that you might have seen that we offer. We do not let an opportunity pass that we can jump on to promote adoption, whether it's Home for the Holidays or celebrating National Pet Week. We even offer $5 Fridays. We have free events, name your own price. Anything that you can imagine, we'll take advantage of it to help raise awareness and get pets out of the shelter. But the shelter does have a capacity limit. And when we hit that capacity limit, we rally. And we are so grateful, proud, and blessed that to this day, every euthanasia list that has been issued by the city due to capacity has been cleared with every animal saved, placed in a foster home or an adoptive home. And we do that by special events, by waiving fees. And when those fees are waived, keep in mind that pet still has to be fully vaccinated for adoption, spayed, neutered, microchipped. So PAWS absorbs those costs. That's where our donors and our grants come in. We do mass emails, press release, social media blast, whatever it takes to make sure everybody in San Angelo knows that there are animals at risk. And it has worked, and our community has come together, and I'm very proud of the fact that they have come together, and we have so far saved them all. When there is a disease outbreak at the shelter, we are there. We are ready to work, whatever that entails. We are all hands on deck. Whether it's an exposure to a toxin like we had a couple of years ago, during that time we treated the entire shelter at our expense. Every animal in the shelter was treated, and only 3 pets died. And so that was an amazing success. During that time, the food had to be pulled because we were unsure of the origin of the toxin. And at that time, we provided food for the entire shelter for a month. If there's a parvo outbreak, we're there. We have our own parvo set up at our facility where we transfer puppies with parvo into our facility for care. So basically, we're there to assist and support however we can, because we do not want to see these animals euthanized because they don't have access to treatment. And so we're there in a supportive role to the city. And again, this is at no cost to the city. So I wanted to take an opportunity, because I know y'all hear from constituents all the time, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of confused people talking. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to just kind of focus on a few of those and give you the facts. Concho Valley PAWS allows pets to leave the shelter unaltered. That is a myth. We do not. Every animal that leaves our facility is spayed or neutered, with the exception of animals that are too fragile or young for the procedure. Spay and neuter is key. We believe in that wholeheartedly, and so we abide by that. It's also state law that requires that the animals leaving a shelter must be spayed or neutered. Concho Valley PAWS puts pets at risk by offering free adoptions. That is absolutely a myth, and it's one I'm happy to talk about. When I started with our organization 15 years ago, we did home visits. It's taken a lot for us to get to where we are removing barriers for adoption, because we also believe that maybe the more we charge, maybe the more work we do behind the scenes, the better guarantee we'll have on that home. It doesn't work that way. We've done this a long time. We've looked at a lot of studies, and there is absolutely, excuse me, no correlation between how much someone pays for an adoption and how valued that pet is. We will find pets in our shelter, $1,800 puppies that have grown up but surrendered to a shelter. And so, but on the flip side of that, you'll see someone who got a dog from a free adoption and it is a beloved family member. So there's a ton of data about this. There's a risk to every adoption. The reason there's a the reason there's a risk to every adoption is because we're dealing with people. And so, but we really try to make sure that we do our due diligence. We check IDs, we do check a criminal background, and we do check the shelter records. So if it's anyone who's had an interaction with animal control that is not positive, or if they have a violent criminal record, or if they don't want to give us a driver's license, they don't get to adopt from us. This is something that I've heard a lot. Concho Valley PAWS does not allow other rescues to save shelter pets. This is absolutely false. As a matter of fact, we have a one-page contract that we utilize with other rescues, and that contract simply says that rescue understands that they're pulling an animal free of charge from the city of San Angelo, and that Concho Valley works with the city of San Angelo. We will assist them however possible, but the animal must be spayed or neutered within 30 days. And that is the gist of the contract. We're very excited that everyone has signed those contracts, and we actually participate with several local rescues. We even assist some of the smaller local rescues in getting those pets spayed and neutered through our clinic. So everyone is welcome. We would never deny an agency access to save a life. Donor dollars pay staff salaries. First of all, I think it's important to recognize that for an organization that does as much as we do, it's imperative that we have staff to ensure continuity, efficiency, and effectiveness. But we're very blessed that we can say that no local donor dollars goes to our staff salaries. We have been very blessed.
Would you like some water?
Yes, if
Could
you have
somebody
some, I
get
am
her
so
some
hoarse
water,
today.
please?
Our staff is paid by a private fund specifically for that purpose. So we are fortunate that we do have a paid staff. We can offer that continuity, but the donor dollars, the money you see us raise on Facebook at our fundraisers, when we're out looking for assistance with medical care for a pet, all of that 100% goes directly to animal care. PAWS programs has led to the shelter closing intake. Again, that's really important for us to point out. We are a completely separate entity from the shelter. We support them in what they do to save lives, but the shelter sets their own policy on when and how that works. Thank you so much. However, we do provide the managed intake, and we're happy to do that. But it's important for people to understand that managed intake and closed intake are two different things. Managed intake targets owned pets, and we're just asking the owners to look at all options before they surrender a pet.
Take a drink.
Thank you. So now we're able tell you, the weather's changing.
Allergies are bad right now.
Now we're able to even help in a bigger way. We're very, very grateful to Judith and David Hirschfeld. They gifted us with an amazing adoption center. Some of you have been out and seen it. If you haven't, I encourage you to come and see it. Within those walls, we have a spay-neuter clinic and recovery space. We have our hospital that I mentioned for our parvo care and moderate illness. It houses our administration office, our adoption offices. It has pet visitation space and a large training space for us to work with people and their pets and trainers. The Stephen dog dorms are now open, and I'm happy to give you kind of a little video walkthrough so you can see our facility. This building is located directly behind the Hirschfeld Adoption Center. We have state-of-the-art kennels. We have state-of-the-art draining. We have a fantastic airflow and recovery system so that we have absolutely awesome air circulation through there to help control smell and bacteria. All the dogs have access to indoor and outdoor space. And we fill this space with shelter pets. So when a pet is adopted from our facility, we just go to the shelter and grab another. But we find that this is allowing us to save even more pets because we are able to give the adopter a smaller environment to experience, so it's not as loud. We have 48 kennels, and at any point we have 50 to 70 dogs in those kennels because we do co-kennel as appropriate. But it allows our adopters a better adoption experience. They're not having to combat all of the pressures and the noise and the sounds of animal control. They're just adopting. And so we've seen the adoption numbers increase dramatically over the last 3 months since we opened. So we're very, very blessed to have that. And we're grateful to the Steve Stevens families for being one of our largest donors to make that happen. Coming soon, cannot forget about the cats. I think we haven't talked about cats a lot because we have done such, I think, incredible work in our community with spay-neuter, not just PAWS, but other rescues doing low-cost spay-neuter for cat colonies, the work the shelter has done to identify colonies that need help, and we're seeing that cat problem start to diminish, and now we're focused on the dogs. But we still have cats that need homes. And if you've ever tried to adopt a cat out that has been in a kennel, it can be a challenge because they're really not interested in the people wanting to visit with them as much as they're interested in getting down and exploring. So this facility will allow adopters to walk into a cageless cat community and sit among the cats and give them a better adoption experience. I think that will generate more cat adoptions as well. So you asked Morgan when she made her presentation back in January what she felt the biggest concern was. And we agree with much of what she said, but I think one of the things that we have failed to really be honest and hit on from our perspective is that our biggest problem and concern is people, uneducated and irresponsible pet owners. We have backyard breeders, pet owners who want instant results. I mean, that's the flaw of our society today. And then pet owners who refuse to get their pets spayed or neutered. But if you're going to identify them as our biggest concern, I think it's fair to also identify them as our biggest opportunity. We need more education, we need more awareness, and we are committed to that. We want to cultivate more volunteers, more donors, more advocates, more adopters, but more people who understand that pets are worth saving. It is our goal, and Judith Hirschfeld said it to me before her death, that we want San Angelo to be a better place for pets and the people who love them. And I think that's perfectly said. So what do we feel the solutions are from where we sit in animal rescue? We really would like to encourage you to consider when your budget comes around or a budget amendment to hire an animal control officer that is specifically to enforce our spay-neuter laws. I think that is probably the most beneficial thing you could do in your positions is to approve that. I think it's important to recognize that even though those tickets are being issued, we're still not achieving compliance. So for example, a ticket is issued, it goes through the court system, that fine is paid. But once the fine is paid, is the pet fixed? Often you're going to find out that it did not get spayed or neutered in the process. And so they'll be repeat offenders and they'll end up at the shelter again, unaltered. It is, I can only imagine the nightmare it would be for that to be something that Morgan puts on her current staff. That's why we feel it is imperative that there be someone in that position that does strictly that. And we believe it is important to consider that as a new position. And again, these are just our recommendations from the outside looking in, but we all see that I think the rescue community sees that as a big benefit and might get us moving in the right direction. Another thing we'd like for you to consider is possibly looking at that breeder's permit and revising it. I don't think that it's really necessary for us to approve breeding for dogs that make up 10% of our shelter population or more. But I'll tell you right now, if you go into the shelter, you're primarily going to see German Shepherds, Shepherd mixes, and Pit Bulls. And that's why we end up with these euthanasia lists, because in our community, we are home to college students, military, senior citizens, and apartment dwellers, renters, and that makes that pool of adopters very small for these large breed dogs. So we have more large breed dogs in our community than we can house. So I think it's very important for us to take a look at that and perhaps put some stricter ordinances in place on breeding to prevent the breeding of those breeds. And then we also would like for you to consider joining our efforts for spay-neuter. If there's ever an opportunity to throw money at something, I think spay-neuter is the direction you need to put it in. We are doing all we can. We will continue to write grants. We will continue to seek donations. But if the city wants to come alongside with us and beef that up, I think that would be a huge step in the right direction. So having said all that, I just want to thank you. I know I've taken up a lot of your time, but it was important for me and our organization that you get a better understanding of what we're doing and how we're working with our city. I hope that maybe that will empower you as you speak to your constituents. And I want to let you know that we welcome and encourage an open dialogue between you and Concho Valley PAWS directly. We welcome any of your questions, and even more than that, I would love to see you come into our new facilities and get a feel for what we're doing and how we're trying to work with our community and make San Angelo a better place for pets and their people.
Thank you. I'm going to open up the floor for comments or questions from council. I'm going to start with Larry. Do you have comments or questions you would like to ask?
Do you have any figures on the feral cat release effect on the colonies out there?
Well, I know that we did close to 300 spay-neuter and returns last year just in our clinic, and that does not include our community cat vouchers that we provide. So as far as getting a number on how many feral cats we have, there is a formula that they will tell you to use, that some of the professionals tell you to use. It's really hard to get a good figure. So what we have started to do at Concho Valley PAWS is, if you have a colony, if you can fill out, it's called a community cat survey, and that gets us the number of cats that you're taking care of on your colony, and how many of those cats are already fixed, and how many of them need to be fixed. And then the other question is, do you know, and not everyone does, if they're male or female, because what we're trying to do at this point is target those females with the funding that we have first. So to give you a hard data on the number of ferals in our community, I mean, it's kind of, they say anywhere from 125,000 to 200,000. I mean, it's just different depending on how you apply that metrics. We're just taking them as they come in. But I will tell you, I don't know about you and your constituents, but the number of calls that we get on cats has drastically decreased over the last 3 years.
I'd also like to thank you for the work you did over Christmas holidays. You saved 25 dogs, as I recall.
Yes, sir. And we had another list in January that there was 25, and I think there were 16 in January that made it on a euthanasia list, but we were able to clear that list as well. So thank you for saying that. But it's our community. You know, it makes me feel good to know that our
Absolutely.
community will rally and step up.
Karen?
Thank you for your presentation, Jeannie. Really thorough. I'm curious if you would share with us how you select shelter animals for adoption through PAWS.
Okay, so like I said, we have 48 kennels, and what we do when a kennel becomes open, we go and look and see who we think is. There's a couple of things we look at. Of course, we look at adoptability, but we also look at a dog that may or may not be declining. We may give them an opportunity to move over to a less stressed environment. Because I don't know how familiar you may be, but when you have a dog kenneled over a period of time, some of them will have serious psychological reaction to that. Others will not. And so we do look at that as well. We also look at breed, because we only have so many large kennels in our facility. So we will try to get some of those medium-sized dogs in there as well. We also try to get a good selection of breeds represented. We don't want to fill up our entire adoption center with pits because we find that people will come into the shelter and look and see that it's predominantly pits and they will leave. We want them to come in and see a couple of different kinds of faces so that they will, if they don't find one they want to adopt, then that they will come back. There's a little bit of marketing psychology that goes behind our process to choose as well, but we do give priority to ones that we think might be showing some decline because we don't want them to move from adoptable to not adoptable.
Speaking of marketing philosophy and strategy, I think we're all familiar with the charming photos. This is Spot. Spot's good with children, also good with cats. Spot would like to be the family's only dog, and so forth and so on. A little story, a charming photograph or video. Do you feel that that strategy works? I know that you use it from time to time and that you have a talented photographer and videographer on your staff.
I think it's like anything in our community. You're going to get people's attention in different ways because we're all different. I think that sometimes the sad, urgent cries for help works and gets people in. But I also think that if you do too much of that, people become desensitized to it. But also, I think it's real important for us to promote the dogs for who they are. There is already that misconception in the community that shelter pets are broken, and these dogs are not. They're so resilient. They may not love being in a shelter, but they are resilient. You get them out of the shelter and they become incredible companion animals. So I think it's finding the right balance. We have to tell the sad stories sometimes because, one, it's the truth, but two, it also touches people differently. Some people can hear that and it calls them to help and get involved. Some people will hear that kind of thing and turn away from it because it's a lot to take in and digest. So I think we have to kind of go at it at a variety of ways.
So it's your belief that the creating the story for the pet is sad?
No, I think we tell their story because it shows their strength. We just don't want, and we don't know all their stories.
Right.
We're fortunate to know some of them.
I'm talking about how it can be engaging, for
Yes.
example, instead of seeing a photograph, because you can look at all of the shelter animals.
Yes.
They're all in there. They may just have a number and a brief description, and they're like little mug shots. And the difference between that and what Macy does for you, for example, is hugely different. They're charming, and the animals are indeed engaging
Yes.
in a different way. You can imagine yourself. You think, oh, Spot might be perfect for my family.
Exactly.
Or,
Showcase their potential.
so I think I'm struggling to understand if that's a strategy that you think can be overused. I think you've implied that.
I think it can be. Again, I just think you can reach people at different places. I think the more in-depth story of how the struggles and them overcoming adversity in the canine world is very motivating for some adopters, and I think other people will look at that and be afraid that dog might be reactive because what that dog may have been through. And so we like to tell their stories, but we also like to show their potential.
Any more? Lucy?
Yes, Jenny, thank you for the presentation as well. You showed us all these programs, and they sound great, and you would think this takes care of our problem, but it doesn't. Somehow, this problem is still ongoing, and you gave me the answer to the main reason, pet owners.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's like we've got all these great programs available, but the people are not taking advantage of it. So I see that. I don't know how you're going to be able to bring these people together to actually have these animals spayed and neutered. My other question is, when you adopt these pets, or when you get them adopted, do you have a high percentage of people that return these pets?
No, we actually have about a 3% return rate on average, and that's lower than a lot of other communities because we have also kind of found our own balance with adoptions. You can look at what some other communities do, and it's literally, you like this dog, sign here. We don't want to do too much background work, but we don't want to not do any background work. And so I think we have found a good balance for our community, that we do a little bit of an interview, a conversation, how are you going to take care of this pet? What are you looking for? That's really what we do more than anything, is help them identify what they want in a pet, especially when we're dealing with someone who's had a pet of 14 years and they are coming to adopt for the first time. It's important to really have that discussion and say, you're taking home a different pet, and this is going to be a different experience. And so it's those kinds of conversations that we have. So we're seeing an average about 3% return, but the returns sometimes they don't make any sense, just like the reason they ended up at the shelter doesn't make any sense. It comes down to the commitment of the person and the pet owner. I know you're not supposed to compare children and animals, but I have adopted both, and it's a lot of the same thing. You have to be committed going into doing this. If we turned our children away the minute they did something wrong, like we do our animals, we would be in really bad shape. So it goes down to what the pet owner's willing to do.
You also mentioned that you felt that hiring an animal control officer would help us. But you also said that no pet leaves the shelter without being spayed and neutered. Okay, so I was a little confused when you said that these officers give them tickets.
Yes, I can see where you're confused. So no, a pet that is adopted per state law does not leave the shelter unaltered. I don't want to speak, I'm not animal control, so I don't want to speak to that, other than to tell you that I don't know that that's the case for owners, for pets that are redeemed. As far as state law, now we have a city ordinance that says your pet must be fixed. So at that time, I believe Morgan issues the ticket when the pet is redeemed. So it's adopted animals, they do not leave the shelter unaltered. If a pet is redeemed, that's another story.
Okay. So, Morgan, can you answer this question for me? Whenever they leave the animal shelter, are they not spayed or neutered? You don't.
Right. So we didn't have this discussion publicly, but we had a memo out last year that defined that, yes, state law mandates all adoptions have to be spayed neutered. City ordinance, and that is the municipal government's responsibility to do so, and we contract that out to PAWS. City ordinance says owners have to spay neuter their pet. And so if an owner arrives at the shelter to claim their pet from lost and found, pets are property as defined by Texas state law. We're prohibited from withholding their pet from them for any reason except the most extreme, where a court order would be issued. And so people leave with their unaltered pets and a citation for unaltered. If they provide an exemption or proof of compliance, then we move forward. It's the animals that leave with a ticket and never provide an exemption or proof of compliance, or those animals we're interacting with in the field. We're also citing, dogs and cats that have never been to the shelter, but we were at your house for another unrelated issue. You're still getting a ticket for failure to spay neuter. But the continued follow-up of, if you get, for example, a speeding ticket, and then you go to the municipal court, you make your plea, you pay your fine, however you choose to proceed with that ticket, that doesn't mean you're never going to speed again. It just means you dealt with that offense from that date. So if you get a ticket for failure to spay neuter, but you never resolve the pet still being intact, still not being spay neutered, then there's a continued violation that this officer, as proposed, would continue to follow up with.
So like the court, and I don't know if you would know this or not, but the court doesn't say, okay, you have this fine, but once you alter your pet, then we're okay. They don't ask for proof of the dog being, or the pet being altered?
No, I believe it's animal services' role to prove compliance. It's the court's role to process the complaint as filed with them for that day for that offense.
They don't have to prove that day when they pay the fine that
That's
their pet is now altered.
They could, but there's, and they could potentially have the ticket forgiven or something like that. But in the event that someone either fails to appear, it doesn't ever appear for that ticket, or that person gladly pays the fine. I plead guilty. My dog's unaltered. I'll pay the fine. or ask for a jury trial, anything like that. All of those are options of how to proceed with the ticket. None of them get the pet altered.
Okay, thank you.
Gary?
Yes, just real quick, I want to say thank you to Jenny because I think this will keep some of the phone calls down that we get on dogs, cats, other pets, whatever the case may be. The one question I have is, how many dogs do you average a month adopting out of your facility?
It's anywhere from 100 to 125. Before COVID, it was better. COVID has changed our world, but I will say that we have seen adoptions start to uptick. The economy is the issue. I mean, we've saw a huge increase in the amount of dog food, cat food, vet care has gone up. So I think responding to that inflation, I think a lot of people were like, we're not getting a pet right now, but we're starting to see, I'm hoping, that trend change.
Thank you.
Tom?
Don't want to pass an opportunity up, but a lot of time I read and hear people complaining about, and this is pets that are outside, people that got bit, one thing. I will say, as a council member whose wife has been bitten twice on my own street, the reply and response has been absolutely outstanding. Now, the fact that they had to listen to my wife, that's on them. It is what it is. But I will say, they showed up, they handled the pet, they quarantined the pets, they did that. I mean, there are things that go on. It's hard, and you have to realize there's only a certain number of people that can respond to these events and happen. But it's everything that I've researched and done and personally experienced. You know, they don't know who I am. They didn't know who my wife was. There was just a citizen called in and they got bit. They were out jogging. Here's what happened. It was all handled perfectly fine. And I get these raving emails and accusations and complaints, and I get that, but there's only so many people that can handle so many calls. And I just want to say the group has done an outstanding job. There's going to be times when we can't do it as good as we want to, but we get that. I mean, we've all got enough common sense to understand it's not going to be perfect 100% of the time. You showed today a plethora of things out there that people aren't aware are available, and they need to use those. They need to do the research, and I thank y'all for doing what you do.
Well, Tom, I would say your wife must be very attractive because she's gotten 2 dogs after her already.
I sometimes say those dogs have a good judge of character. You never know, all right?
Tommy?
Well, maybe we need to go ahead and tell Mr. Thompson goodbye because we may never see him again after today. I, too, want to thank you, Jenny, for your presentation and for what you do. Question I have is some of the emails and calls I have received have focused on the chip, I'm going to call it process. Is there something we could do in conjunction and partnership with you all to make the chip process a more robust process with more information? I really don't know how to ask the question other than make it a better process for tracking, et cetera. Is there something that we should look at that we're not doing?
Well, I know Morgan's got some things that she has shared with me that she has planned, and I'll let her speak to that. But I will tell you some things that we've seen work in other communities. But first, every animal that is adopted, that chip is registered to the information they gave us. Where we run into problems is when that information changes and that person hasn't updated the chip. That seems to be the crux of it. And how do you fix that? I mean, I don't know. But we do have, like, Westlake Hardware. Several of my volunteers have microchip readers. I think all of animal control officers have microchip readers, so that those pets that are chipped and they have that information, they can get back home directly. But as far as maintaining that and keeping it accurate, it falls back on that responsible pet owner. And how do we make that happen? I wish I had an answer.
Is there perhaps an ombudsman that exists already that could be let's just call it the final stop if everything that the pet owner has provided yields nothing in terms of information? Is there an ombudsman situation where that could go to, I don't know, a central clearinghouse or something like that, so that they would then call PAWS City Shelter as opposed to everybody just throwing up their hands and saying, well, we don't have any more information, they didn't give us much. Is there something that exists like that?
Yes, so with our chips, when we do an adoption, and I'll let Morgan speak to when she chips in her clinics, but when we do an adoption, we are listed as we're listed as the implant facility and a secondary contact. And so if they're not able to get good numbers, then they can call us, and then hopefully we might have something. We try to get additional contacts in our database when we do the adoption, so hopefully maybe we'll have a way to get in touch with that pet owner. It's when that pet owner has given the pet away that we really, we're kind of stuck. But I'll let Morgan speak to how she handles that there.
So Concho Valley PAWS and the city of San Angelo use the same brand of microchip, and we're real big fans of the brand of microchips that the both of us use, meaning that there's no annual fee, and we're your local office that has implanted it and registered it. That's a lot of the frustration we see is someone bought a microchip, they had it implanted in their pet, and the owner was handed, here's how you register your microchip. And if you're someone that is very computer savvy and sits at a computer and has lots of access, then that's probably pretty easy. But a lot of the customers that we're supporting and working with have maybe a smartphone in their pocket, but not much more than that. So we do register that microchip on behalf of the owner. PAWS does as well with all of their adoptions. And we're your local implant facility. We actually had a pet come into the shelter on Tuesday, and she was microchipped by our facility, and all efforts to reach out to the owner were a dead end. So we do have an ombudsman, if I could borrow the term, with a group called Lost Dogs of Texas, where they do microchip dead end follow-up, and they have access to databases to really continue to reach out to folks and say, look, your pet's at the shelter, we've got to get that animal back to you. And so we had done that outreach, and we have a lot of success with that when it reaches to that level. But for this one, it was moving so quickly that by Friday, actually, I got a message from the owner. She had moved from San Angelo in early 2022. The week she was moving, her dog was stolen out of her backyard, and she had moved to the Panhandle in Texas. And she said, I never had any anticipation I'd see this dog again, but lucky me, the microchip still registered to me. It's just the phone number was a dead end. And I said, she said, I contacted my vet clinic about getting it updated. I said, we're your people. You bought it from us, you registered it with us. And so we love that for San Angeloans because we're an easily accessible office by, phone, email, walk-in traffic. But also if you've moved to the Panhandle, we're still the person for this dog. And so we got updated microchip information for this pet. I was actually traveling to Big Spring, and I said, do you know what? I'll meet you halfway. And we met, and we got the dog transported over to her. And the dog was spayed, current with all other items. She hadn't seen the dog in 2 years, and the dog was so excited to see her and her kids. I mean, a totally different animal than what we had in the shelter. So we believe that microchips work. We believe our microchips specifically work, because there's no annual fee, that if it lapses, they don't release your information. And we do reach out that when all efforts are exhausted, we reach out to that Lost Dogs of Texas group and see a lot of their efforts bear fruit in somebody that has blocked us, somebody who has cursed us out, somebody who is not coming in the door. Lost Dogs of Texas can get that person. They walk in and say, I'm here to get my dog. And we, professionally handle the transaction. But all our efforts had not yielded that response to date.
Good, thank you.
All right, so my questions are the following. So as it relates to the court system, they pay a fine, they go home, but they don't have to prove anything at the court. So I'm going to pay my fine, my citation, I'm going to take my animal, and I'm not going to have it spayed or neutered. And that's the ordinance that allows that, or the law that allows that.
They get cited again. When my office was working with people who have not spayed or neutered their pets, one of the comments we got often was, well, I already paid my fine. And it was like, yeah, that was for that day. So they get cited again, and they'll continue to get cited until they do show proof of spay and neuter.
So how do we do that follow-up? Because obviously it requires a lot of follow-up. It's one thing to say it, it's another to do it, and that is follow up and make sure that that has happened.
Morgan can speak more currently, but last year Daniel authorized a part-time position in my office that was dedicated solely to following up on the backlog of those citations. And she reached out and she managed to close a number of cases. I think Morgan has since taken over that same process we developed in my office with her own staff.
And do we need to rethink the dollar amount for this citation? Because money talks, and I just wonder if the fine attached to not having it spayed and neutered is appropriate relative to the problem.
We are limited in the amount of fine that we can put on top of a citation by the Texas Local Government Code, but we can see where it is and see if it's can be raised at all. There's also, to the discretion of the court to raise or lower fines, as well as the prosecutor. So just because the fine is set at $500 does not mean that every citation is going to be $500.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
we're having regular meetings with Karen on some of these issues, and we came to that same conclusion last week. We are going to follow up with the court and see what latitude exists for solutions. Part of the solution may be dollar values, but there may be some process solutions that the court is capable of. We just don't know, and so we're going to ask if they have suggestions for what a solution would look like. Part of the solution, the optimal solution, would be a minimum number of contacts. In other words, we don't have to follow up 3 times and hire staff so that we can follow up 3 times. Is there a way through the first contact and the process at the court to be assured that a solution is achieved, the ultimate solution being the alteration of the animal? We're not really pursuing revenue at the court. We're pursuing the solution for this animal. And so we're going to open that conversation with the court, see what kind of latitude we have and their ability to help us with those solutions, and we'll go from there.
So I have, my sister and brother-in-law took in one of my cats when I changed locations of where I lived, and unfortunately that cat got out, and this is in Midland, Texas. The cat got out, it was picked up by Animal Services, and they would not release that cat back to my brother-in-law until he had completed training. Just wonder what we do, because they required it. He could not have that cat back in his possession until he attended these night classes or whatever. So it's just an idea, a thought, because obviously, as you mentioned early on, the problem is people. And what we need to do is find a way to communicate more loudly and aggressively about the responsibility of a pet. Number one, do you know how much it will cost you annually to have a pet in your home? Are we clear about that dollar amount? Dollars always speak, and what we hear a lot is people give them up because of the cost. What's the cost of annual veterinary? What's the cost of food? What's the cost of all those things? We need to make sure we're communicating loudly and clearly the cost of owning a pet. I also want to know if there is a way to limit the number of permits, as you brought up earlier, by breed. Because if pit bulls are a big issue for us, can we limit the number of new permits issued every year?
First, to speak to your suggestion about a class, I believe Concho Valley PAWS has offered that in the past. So similar to the example where if you get a speeding ticket, you could also plead no contest and take a defensive driving class. Concho Valley PAWS has offered to stand up like a responsible pet ownership class, and we just couldn't get it tied to that in the court system, but it's something we can, review again. For the, I'm sorry, remind me of your second question.
Well, I'm just saying, the second question was limiting the number of permits by breed. If our number one problem is pit bulls,
Yeah, I think
can we limit the number of permits issued?
I can request a legal review. There had been previous statewide legislation that no breed-specific legislation can be passed, but I think if it's so I would want to know the nuance of what that covers, of what can be considered for that process.
Because the state and other states have had a major issue with overabundance of animals, I would think that the courts would be looking at some means to control this issue. Perhaps it's changed, perhaps it isn't, but perhaps we need someone to take to the legislators a bill, a concept of enough is enough. Very much encourage communication. Did you know, as I brought that up a minute ago, did you know your pet will cost you this amount of money on an annual basis? Did you know that a dog's performance and character and the way it reacts to people and children is a owner's responsibility? Pets aren't born with meanness in their bodies. People teach them to be aggressive and mean.
And that is a conversation we have when people are considering rehoming their pets. If they disclose that it does have aggression in the home or a bite history, we do calmly communicate that it sounds like maybe the last step of your responsible pet ownership for this animal is having that pet euthanized. And if there is a concern for safety in the home or transporting it, we do offer transport services where we confirm your appointment, we meet you at your home, we transport that pet to the vet, that when you own an aggressive animal and it's gotten out of hand, the answer's not the shelter. The tough answer is, this is my pet, I have to do the final, right thing for my household in this community by euthanizing it.
And we do not take into our shelter animals or people who live in the county, correct?
Correct.
And how do we make sure of that?
We require proof of residency for intake, and that can be a current valid driver's license, a piece of mail, proof of insurance, just something showing residency in San Angelo city limits.
I'm assuming that many of the pets that are dropped off into our community are from the county. People come in, bring them in from the county and think no one's going to know. How do we better communicate outward that if you live in the county and you dump your animals into our city, there will be a fine?
I don't know by what mechanism there would be a fine. If there's an untagged,
If
unchipped
somebody
animal
saw
that
them
we
dump
pick
those
up.
dogs and could get a driver, what do you call it, a license plate, that we could figure that out.
It's already in the penal code. It's already in the penal code, and I'm sure Teresa knows more about this than I do, but that it's unlawful to unreasonably abandon an animal. So I don't know that, when we see it happen in the county, we call the sheriff because it's unlawful. When it's done at our facility, we call the police department because it's unlawful to abandon an animal.
How many of those a year do we make, those calls?
We've 2-3 dozen a year for us. The outcome is never what I would like it to be, but I'm kind of a stickler for that. But we do report it when we see it, and we have it posted on our facility that it is unlawful to abandon an animal. And when people come in and they are trying to bring an animal to us that we don't have space for because the shelter's full and we're full and all the other rescues are full, and they say, well, we're just going to dump it. And we're like, well, if you do that, then we will report it to the police department because, as you can see right there, it's in the Texas Penal Code that it is unlawful. But I think it's a misdemeanor. I would like for them to put more teeth into that as well, but that's the state level.
The misdemeanors at the state level?
I believe so in that case.
I can look it up, but our court does handle Class C misdemeanors. So we do probably have some of those. I can look that up, though. But I think they're right that, there is legislation already in place, some statutes already in place, that allow us to do what you're asking. That's not the hard part of it. The hard part is identifying the person, providing PD enough information, and then PD finding them, and to be able to prosecute those tickets, so.
Again, I think it's an issue of communication. How are we communicating outwardly that if you do these things, this is the price you pay? Did you know? For the people that are well acquainted with your organization, et cetera, the great results. But obviously, there's still so many people who are ignorant to the fact of what happens in this community with unwanted pets and far too many of them. It's a major issue. And it's great we're getting our hands around it and programs around it and improving the statistics as it relates to this. But the job is not done.
No.
And the communication has to get more aggressive and out there for people to better understand what's going on.
I think, I'll just tell you from our perspective, looking at this, and we are primed and ready, and it is in our yearly plan to do a lot more education and a lot more awareness. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to take people seeing someone have to go through this process. I mean, it's like they need to know that there is a consequence to these actions, and I think they need to know that in a way that's greater than us just telling them. I would love to have an opportunity where we saw one go through the court system and there was a penalty that or someone was penalized in some way, and we could use that as an example. But we're not seeing that enforcement, and that's just kind of through the sheriff's department, the police department. It's kind of like the animal issue is kind of the lowest. I know they have this is not a criticism. They have so much that they deal with. But that's kind of where we are, is that enforcement's kind of on the bottom rung, it feels like, when we're looking at these issues. Because like I said, we've called and reported, and I know that some have made it to the DA's desk, or I should say county attorney's desk, but I've never seen anything get past that point on these abandonment issues.
You know, the city has many responsibilities, and we put a lot of money towards our responsibilities towards the citizens. We can't keep throwing more dollars and more people after the problem. The budgets just don't allow it. And it's great to say more people's going to solve it, but we keep doing this and the problem isn't solved. So throwing people and dollars after the problem isn't going to solve it. Communication might solve it, consistent communication, consistency in that. We've got to get it out there because the city doesn't just have more money to keep throwing at the problem. We're spending a tremendous amount of money to improve the facility of the animal shelter, close to $2 million this year and a half, or next year, right? So more and more and more is not going to happen. We've got to have a program about communication and enforcement. Those are the two big challenges, communication and enforcement. And I believe strongly that your presentation today was very thorough. It was terrific. I think it should educate a lot of people about, as you say, the myths and the false myths and the reality. We need to keep this up. Many people watch council on Channel 17, but we need to use our public information offices more aggressively. I suggest you all need to be more aggressive about communicating. We have to make sure everyone's aware of the responsibility of pet ownership, because it's not on the city. We can't keep throwing money and dollars.
Mayor, I do want to point out that I think the majority of our citizens are responsible pet owners. It's always that select group, that doesn't, they're not responsible, but it causes the issue. So it's not right for the majority of the taxpayers to be paying for additional monies for the shelter because a group is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I agree with that. I think that we have budgeted, we have put money toward it, and it does go back to education. It goes back to making people understand that this is your responsibility. And again, I don't want the people that are listening, because there's a lot of great individuals that are responsible, are doing their thing. It's just that few that causes and exacerbates the problem. So hopefully, with a good educational program, we can get that out there with a good system in place to find and make sure those individuals, we hold their feet to the fire. That's going to have to be the way that we go with that.
So I just want to finish my comments, and that is, thank you for the work that both of you are doing. This is an emotional issue, it's a complicated issue, and it's an issue that doesn't get solved overnight. But I believe strongly that both of you women are doing a terrific job of leading the programs and the responsibilities attached to what you're doing. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you for saying that.
I'm proud of the work that's being done, but it's not over and it will never be over. So we got to continue to look at the next challenges attached to this. And I believe strongly it's communication and enforcement, those two things.
Mayor, I have
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, I have this, I had this memo that stated that y'all were going to have the animal service open house. How did that go on February the 7th?
We're hosting it weekly.
You're continuing, did you have people that showed up?
Yes, so the February 7th open house was, I believe, well-attended, a good contingency from Concho Valley PAWS. Key council members attended, and we appreciate that support. We had about 24 members of the public come through, and so we'll continue that weekly. We'll also start hosting special events with them, and so we'll have like a check the chip type event where I believe my pet's microchipped, but I don't know if their information is current or I don't know what the microchip number is. We'll also have a microchip clinic type event where you can bring your pets in and have that microchip implanted right there. So we wanted to hit it hard with weekly open houses. We anticipate scaling back at some point. We wanted to have a really clear venue for communication for folks that had concerns and questions and ideas, so that when folks approach you, you can say, look, Morgan has an open house. Can we try to address it at that level? I would definitely get involved. I hear you. I want to make sure that this is handled. But there are resources to try to get this handled in a way that is tough to have dialogue, like in a public comment and an open meeting like council. So we wanted to open up this venue, and we will host that through the summer weekly, and then we'll reassess, does it need to be scaled back or what kind of changes might happen. But yeah, we're continuing that, and we'll have another one tomorrow at 5 p.m. at Animal Services.
I think that's a great idea, and I'd like to let the constituents know that are watching, this is the perfect place for them to go with their concerns, with their complaints, and their solutions. Mainly, if you've got solutions, let y'all know. But I think this is a great program.
Thank you. And we're going to be getting y'all monthly updates. So we launched that first week in February. First week of March, I'll get you an update of about this many people attended, about this many, these were the major topics of concern, because we want to be responsive to y'all that we're, trying to address things at our level.
Thank you.
One last moment for anybody else to make a comment, and if there are no other questions or comments, thanks again for the thorough presentation, for the professionalism behind the presentation, and Morgan for the work that you're doing. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Jackie has a question or comment.
How long do I get?
3 minutes.
All right. Jackie Chestnut, live in the county of Tom Green, not in the official city of San Angelo. I have lots of comments about this topic. I didn't know y'all were so unhappy with us Tom Green County people. First of all, I wish I had had enough attention paid to the fact that my husband was abducted into this town with $4 million of my assets. Police didn't care, sheriff didn't care, county attorney, city attorney didn't care, district attorney didn't care, so good luck with your dogs. Okay, I've been a dog person my entire life. Supported the Humane Society. I'm a 70s girl, big on the Humane Society. I've adopted animals, I've raised animals. I did wildlife rescue of fawns for many, many, many years. That's one of the things I do on my ranch. So this is near and dear to my heart. The past 3 dogs I have adopted have come from the San Angelo City Shelter. And it's a vile place, a nasty place. My most recent dog, Einstein, that I have now, I adopted 2 years ago from that nasty little shelter. Poor baby was an abuse. He'd been kept in a cage after he'd been hit by a car, and his whole back end is off. And I got him all straightened out with Dr. Womack, who was kind enough to do that, but I adopted him there. So I've adopted, like I said, my last 4 animals, actually from the shelter. 2 of the dogs I have wandered up out in the county. I have 4 cats that wandered up out in the county, and I've had all those fixed because I'm a responsible pet owner. And you can't change. People are irresponsible when it comes to animals, and you can't fix it. and you can't change it, and you can talk all you want, but it's the way they treat their animals, and the way they treat their people, and the way they treat all the other things. It's a human problem. Animals are not possessions, and they should be treated with respect and dignity like humans, because they are animals, and we take them on to raise and care for. Okay. Maybe we should offer a dog abuse list like we do a sex offender list if we want to keep people from readopting animals that they've abused or disposed of before as nothing, which we do with women all the time. We throw them aside. Let me back up to my first comment. That comment that was made about your wife and her looks and being bit by dogs and her reaction to that and comment, that was so inappropriate after a 30-minute, 40-minute discussion on dogs and her response to that and how, what did you say? Had to listen to your wife? Please, sir, that was so inappropriate. And that her being bit had something to do with her looks. So all that was very inappropriate. And, excuse me, if particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to form in a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which you have no voice or representation. So please, don't make comments like that, especially when we're talking about dogs.
Can I pull the trigger?
My name is Cindy, and I'm on the board for Concho Valley PAWS. And there's a couple of things. I want to reinforce that spay-neuter is the answer and enforcement of spay-neuter. I also believe, like you, that communication is a big factor, but I want to encourage that. I know you said no more money being thrown out, but I think the position, hiring a position to specifically enforce the breeder's permit and the spay-neuter would help pay for itself in the end, because you're going to be housing fewer animals once that's enforced. Secondly, I want to invite you all again to come out to the facility and see. To date, I think Karen Hesse-Smith is the only one that's been out there to see the facility.
I've been out there.
Okay, and I think it just, for the two of you, the rest of you all, I want to encourage that you come and see. It's one thing to see it on video. It's one thing to see pictures. It's another thing to see it enforced. Another thing that I would like to consider is for you all to review the dog food that is being fed at the shelter. The ingredients has a heavy dairy ingredient. Dairy's very heavy on the ingredients, and that's going to be a good reason for dogs to have diarrhea and bloat and all of that, which will contribute to the difficulty of keeping kennels clean. Dairy is not good on either dogs or cats system, and the ingredients, it's very heavy in the list on the food that's being fed. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Further public comment? All right, seeing none, we will conclude this presentation and discussion.